we have an opposition who's leading in the polls who doesn't understand the economy.
Are you going to put your name on a ballot at some point?
Well, I mean, I'm
One of Trudeau's MPs just leaked out when he's planning on having the next election. Welcome back to Moose on Loose. My name's David, and today's top stories, we've got that one, which is coming from an interview from a Liberal podcaster, Nathan Erskine Smith, who interviews carbon tax Carney. Greasy little carbon tax Carney says a lot. He's basically him dipping his toe into the political arena here with Justin Trudeau is essentially his plan to get into politics with the Liberal government. After all the disaster with Jasper, Stephen Guilbeault insults the foresters that are involved in this situation. We've also got a very bizarre clip from Jonathan Wilkinson, among some other stuff, including Trudeau getting heckled. Let's jump into it. We've got Justin Trudeau coming out of his office here and snickering at the camera, as it says here, like a school child when confronted with the reality that pro-Palestinians he's enabling swarmed an RCMP vehicle the other day.
Mr. Trudeau, quite the scene outside your office yesterday.
There's his big cheeky grin, that big greasy cheese bucket smile. There, great poupon. Sit down, Trudeau. We don't want to see you.
Yesterday. It's not funny. It is not funny. Scandal after scandal.
How does this guy go on his day? Every time he walks out the door, he's just getting heckled and humiliated, and people is just going after him. Like, how does a man live like that? He obviously was not born with a heart. He doesn't have a normal range of emotions or guilt.
Here he goes.
Get that traitor out of here. Elect John Rustad in BC. Imagine if BC, Alberta, Saskatchewan stood together. What a powerhouse. We could be like Quebec and demand more. Think about it. Can Canadians get away with blocking his motorcade because they nearly rammed several cars on the 407 protecting whomever was inside? We got this here. It says you want to use a public washroom anywhere in BC, but this SkyTrain station is one of the least safe places of all BC. So public washrooms in restaurants, public washrooms outside are all taken over by junkies. So you can see here, just zombies completely whacked out. This is David Eby's BC. Are you out voting? Who are you voting for? You voting for this? Because this is right at the SkyTrain. NDP needles, drugs, poverty. $420,000 each, and this is what we get with them. Next up, we got this clip here, a very insulting clip coming from Stephen Guilbeault. As Marty up north here says, Guilbeault keeps saying they're not scientists when referring to foresters who warn them about the dangers of not cutting down dead trees around Jasper. If I was on that committee, I'd start every meeting by saying Stephen Guilbeault is not a scientist. He studied religion in university. That's absolutely savage. Just listen to how insulting the guy is here.
So I understand then that's very clever, but they were right. They were absolutely right. Not
No,
enough
we
was
did
done.
everything they said.
Even the mayor, who's also probably not a forestry expert, if a fire starts in the Miette River Valley in dry conditions with a bunch of dead standing trees, this was around the same time, the intensity of that fire could be just enormous. So while they may not be the professionals at the department, they were right.
Not scientists either, Senator. You referred to them as scientists. As Andrews pointed out, they're foresters, but I don't believe they're scientists. There's a difference.
Two scientists, Emile Bégin and Ken Hodges, already alerted Parks Canada officials to the impending catastrophe and the lack of necessary preparedness and prevention measures.
You referred to them as scientists. I just don't. It's not to take anything away from them. I just don't think.
Yeah, that takes away from them. The foresters know the forests, man. Big corrupt government is killing the country. Clearly, Liberal government, and this one man is 100% to blame for Jasper. How is it that more people are not outraged? We are so exhausted with the rest of the scandals that we can no longer respond. What he did was no different than lighting the match himself. This is Trudeau's MP, Nate Erskine Smith, who has this Liberal podcast. He's interviewing carbon tax Carney on a number of topics here. Throughout this interview, most of it they talk about the green policies and the green world and banking and all sorts of stuff, but there's a few clips in here that are quite interesting regarding strictly politics and the Conservatives.
So, though, imagine a world, because we've lived through it, where there's a Bolsonaro government in Brazil that doesn't care. Yeah. I can imagine a world, because if the election was tomorrow, it might well be a Poilievre government that is going to not only cancel the price on pollution and an effective and efficient way of reducing emissions. Climate disclosure might be by the wayside. Who knows? Who knows what they have in store, because climate is not part of their agenda. It's not a going concern. And how do you maintain that sense of optimism when we live in the political world that we do, and the political reality is that progress doesn't always exist? We're going to wake up potentially to a majority government that doesn't have this on the agenda at all.
Well, okay, there's a lot in those questions / statements.
We have a progressive government that doesn't even deliver the climate finance internationally, at least, that is required to do the work you're even talking about. That's a progressive government.
That's a progressive
government.
Yeah.
You know, the backsliding we're going to see is going to be incredible, given we're starting at a place that isn't even sufficient.
It's funny he talks about sufficient. We don't have sufficient housing and food for people. Just look at the food bank lines. How can he even talk like that when we don't even have the basics for our own people, let alone giving away our millions of dollars of our hard-earned tax dollars to other countries? It's preposterous.
There's a lot beneath what I'm about to say.
Yeah.
Carbon border adjustment mechanism, which Europe is putting in place, I think underappreciated. The Biden administration has made pretty clear they intend to put that in place. Obviously, it won't be the Biden administration. He's not running again. But if it were a Harris administration, I think it's reasonable to expect that. It's looking at what's called, it's looking at a carbon border adjustment, and specifically how much carbon is in a product delivered to the United States. They use the term embodied carbon. So the issue is, if I'm exporting steel, how much carbon do I have in that steel that shows up in the United States? And if it's a lot higher than what's in the US, then they're not going to let it in. I mean, or they're going to have a very large tariff on it, because after all, what they've been doing, and we've got to think about this for our industries, is huge efforts to get carbon down, and it doesn't make sense to do that and then just import all the carbon from China or some other jurisdiction.
So this idea he's talking about here is basically every single product has a carbon footprint, a green rating, or essentially, and then everyone would adhere to this and be judged or balanced off against this. This only works if the entire world gets on board. You can't have just a couple of countries on board, because then all the other countries on the other side of the planet do it so much cheaper, don't have to adhere to this. They can undercut everyone. This sounds like a great idea if you're the guy who's making the money off of the whole system, which carbon tax Carney would be. How are they going to get China to sign up for this? Vietnam, all those countries over there, they're not going to do it. We should talk about why it doesn't make sense to have Canada have this carbon tax and we only affect 2% of the global emissions. Carbon tax Carney didn't get his name here for no reason.
I think actually the Americans are going to go further, and the Europeans are going to go further in the following respect, which is not just to say how much carbon is in the steel that shows up here, but how much carbon is in all the steel you produce as that company. Because we don't want you just dumping the green steel over here and then polluting over there.
Right.
And that's a fairer way of doing things for the U.S. company, and let's keep it close to home for the Canadian company. So we're going to quickly move, I think, over the course of the next 5-10 years, certainly over the horizon when any business decision is being made, to a global trading system, or the core of the global trading system, Europe, the US, under certain political circumstances. But I would argue, if not the next administration, the administration after that will do this. We're going to move to a system where it matters how much carbon you have in your product when you export it there. Now, fast forward to the next Canadian government after the next election. So are they just going to walk away from that reality? We're a trading nation. We're an exporting nation. This is our most important market. I mean, you can live in a fantasy land and say this doesn't matter and it's all about the other guys, but that is not the way the world works and is going to work. Is that the world's being reshaped. The trading system is being reshaped. Canada's in a good position, or we can be in a great position to take advantage of this.
Canada is not in a good position, period, though. We've never had this many tent cities in our life. This guy talks about it as like a global economic lens. There's no lens on the people itself that are suffering.
You're occupying a more partisan role, giving, you're the chair of an economic task force for the party and the prime minister. But again, a partisan front, not the machinery of government. Why you've got you're making money at Brookfield. You've got your UN envoy role.
Yeah.
You don't need to throw yourself into the Pierre Poilievre attacks and the Michael Barrett saying conflict this and carbon tax Carney. And why insert yourself in this way now?
I could ask you the same question.
Yeah,
and all the
that's
people
fair.
work for it, which is, I mean, there's a couple levels of it. I mean, there's the personal level, which this country has given me so much, virtually everything. I think when I think about it, my education, my values, I've raised my family here. I owe it a lot. I've been very fortunate.
Yeah.
So, and I can give back. And there's certain things I can do to give back.
Give back, as in the first thing he does once he gets into this special role is $2 billion of our tax dollars get loaned out to Telesat Lightspeed, a friend of his, tax-free for years. I think it's free for 5 years. They don't have to pay tax on that couple $1 billion. You could put that into a GIC account and have it make you like $100 million, give back the money, and have done nothing with it. They're supposed to be building satellites. They haven't built a single one.
Back, and I happen to know something about economic policy. I happen to have some experience. I've got some perspective. I can give it back. I've got some expertise. Prime Minister's asked. We need to close this gap. I think it's the right thing to do for Canadians because it's living up to what Canadians say they want. It's certainly the right thing to do for our kids and grandkids. But also, as time goes on, it becomes more and more an economic imperative. It becomes more and more current. An issue in terms of how fast is this economy going to grow? Are people's wages going to grow? Are we going to lose a lot of jobs that we shouldn't lose or not create new jobs that we could create because we think that this is an issue for other people?
I am not running again solely because I've got a young family. I still think elected office, for all of its faults, and there are many faults, there's a lot of nonsense to it. If you watch Question Period or House Commons.
Liberals have definitely made a difference. Unfortunately, it's the wrong kind of difference.
There's a difference, though, between giving advice and being a decision maker. Are you going to put your name on a ballot at some point?
Well, I mean, I'm taking steps to that support the party because I believe in the party. I believe in the Liberal Party. I think it's got the right values. It has the right combination of a social conscience and social priorities at its core, and that's a demonstrated. It's not. These aren't words on a page. It's demonstrated through decades of delivery and
demonstrated through hundreds of Canadian streets filled with tents. He had that greasy, slimy chuckle when he asked him that. Of course he's going to run. He's just waiting for Trudeau to lose, the party to absolutely burn to the ground, then he's going to come on in. And
the past years of delivery, so it has at its core, but it also understands that we need a strong economy in order to ultimately deliver that. So I absolutely believe in that. And look, the opportunity may present itself. This is what I can do right now, and I'm doing it to the best of my ability.
Next up, listen very carefully what he says here.
So I know what I'd be getting into. I know what I'm in. Look, I'm in it now in the following respect. As you said, in 2021, I'm a private citizen. I'm invited to a committee.
Getting grilled for no
I get grilled. Well, not grilled. I don't mind being grilled, but just getting, sort of insulted, ad hominem attacks, basically being insulted. And 4 other expert witnesses have to sit there mute
and just watch it.
And just watch it for 2.5 hours. I mean, that's a waste of taxpayers' money. It's a waste of time. It's not advancing the cause. And so I know what's involved.
So you're ready. You're ready to put up with that absolute nonsense when it comes. Like right now, you're living through people attacking you to say, oh, he's no. I mean, Andrew Scheer. I love that Andrew Scheer is the spokesperson they put up, as if anyone likes Andrew Scheer. But Andrew Scheer is saying, oh, there's no difference between Trudeau and Carney, carbon tax Carney, and like you are the object of their attention as much as anyone, and probably because they're worried about you, but also there is you are going to put up with an incredible amount of hate and an incredible, look what the Trudeau's got to put up with fuck Trudeau flags.
Wow. What Trudeau has to put up with. This is the guy who's put Canadians on the street. We've got 1 in 4 people in Ontario going to food banks, record food bank levels. Trudeau's got to put up with F Trudeau flags. I'm sorry, Trudeau. I can't believe Nathan just said that. That's the most arrogant, heartless comment ever.
And his kids have to listen to Trudeau chants at ultimate fight events. So
maybe Trudeau shouldn't have destroyed Canada. Maybe that's what should have happened. This is like preposterous, the crap coming out of his mouth.
You're ready for that?
Look, yes is the short answer. I think this is an overused phrase. We're better than that. Canada's better than that. We should be better than that. But you've got to stand up. I mean, if you think that, you think that.
I think your name recognition will.
I'm really touched by your concern about my welfare.
It's not for the faint of heart, that's for sure, especially in a leadership role. And they'll come at you with everything, as you've already seen. They're coming at you as a citizen. The other challenge you will have to navigate if you get there is every time your name comes up. Like I'm here in the beaches, and people will come up and say, "Oh, what about that Carney guy? Is he going to run?" And so there's obviously an interest. At the same time, there will be another cohort, often people in the Liberal Party who have lived the wars, who will say, "Yeah, but what about Michael Ignatieff?" And the comparison comes up all the time. Why? Because intellectual, someone who has not lived through partisan politics throughout a career and is coming to it as an intellectual who's earned a reputation as an intellectual. And do you see that comparison? Are you concerned with that comparison? And how do you answer that comparison? Well,
there's a big difference between carbon tax Carney and Justin Trudeau. Trudeau was born, when the prime minister was in power, so everyone knew the guy. Nobody really knows carbon tax Carney aside from, the publicity he's getting on YouTube and the, recent stuff with Trudeau hiring him and stuff. He's not really, they had that poll, and I think that it was 7% of Canadians could identify this guy.
Well, I think there's a couple of things. One is we don't want to restrict politics only to lifelong politicians,
I hope not, yeah.
right? I mean, that's first and foremost.
Having done it for 10 years, I will also say I hope we don't limit it.
Understand, right? And if somebody's a lifelong politician and they're talking about, for example, as only someone like Pierre Poilievre, who's been a lifelong politician, talks about the market in a way and the economy in a way that betrays very limited understanding of how the economy actually works, undervalues institutions, undervalues people, doesn't know this relationship.
I like when he talks about electricians and lightning, personally.
The capture.
Anyways.
These guys are being idiots. There's a video of Poilievre. I'll put it on the channel here. I got to dig it up, of him and carbon tax Carney basically having a debate, and Poilievre destroys him. So carbon tax Carney's getting his little shots in here, but I'd love to see him go toe to toe, like standing there in question period or in an actual debate. He'd get crushed by Poilievre.
There's a few things he doesn't understand. So that's the first thing. So I don't think this is a sort of simple, you're ruled out unless you've gone through the school of politics. That's number one. Number two, I think with respect to Michael Ignatieff, I've been as close to the political arena as you can.
Right.
I have been a public figure through crises in Canada, elsewhere around the world. I've been there for making tough decisions. I've worked with a variety of governments. I've been in and around. Look, I know how to deal with tough issues and not just talk about them, but implement and get things done.
So next up here, Nathan slips up when we're going to have an election. I haven't heard anything about this.
So one of the knocks on me that the opposition makes, or part of the opposition,
a WEF global elite.
Exactly. I'm a WEF global.
John Barrett is too, but I don't know.
And,
campaign coach here, that never comes up.
When
he's banned his ministers from going to World Economic Forum events to cater to conspiracies, and you've been a board member for over a decade.
I've rolled off the board, but that's absolutely right. I had a board member there, and I used to go there with Prime Minister Stephen Harper when he was there, and etc. Let's be clear what my international experience. I understand how the world works. I know other world leaders. I know people and understand. I know people who run some of the world's largest companies and understand how they work. I know how financial institutions work. I know how markets work. I know the good and bad of that. I've experienced it. I've had to, in some of my roles, discipline the financial system, discipline with others the world's largest banks, the Wall Street banks in America after the crisis. So I understand how the world works. I'm trying to apply that to the benefit of Canada. So I'm not going to run away from the fact that I understand how things work. We have an opposition who's leading in the polls who doesn't understand the economy, doesn't understand where the world's going, doesn't understand what's necessary to build this economy for Canadians, who thinks it's a series of simplistic slogans. There's nothing behind those slogans. There's nothing behind those slogans.
Yeah, and what do we have right now? Give me a break. Canada's in the worst shape it's ever been.
That is massive risk. Doing nothing is a choice. Pretending we're in the economy of the 1980s and 1990s, that is a huge, huge mistake. We've got to do it in a way that is socially inclusive, that brings Canadians along,
that makes you money. Like you're making your buddy, the CEO from Telesat Lightspeed, some money.
Supports people through these big transitions, and we can do it in a way that really wins if we're deliberate about it. But if we shut all that out, we're going to lose.
That's a useful turn.
We're already losing right now. What kind of clown world do these guys live in?
And to the role that you now occupy to chair this economic task force. You are in a position now, principally, I mean, we've got a fall economic statement, we've got a budget, but principally, as I understand the role, it's also to inform. If we have an election in the spring, in a perfect world, it might last all the way to October, but that seems unlikely these days.
I'm sorry, we have an election in the spring? What did you just say? I think he just slipped the cat out of the bag. Let's hear that one more time.
If we have an election in the spring,
I think he slipped a little too much information out of the old caucus meeting there. I don't know if Trudeau's going to make it to the spring. What is he going to prorogue to the spring and then come out of prorogation? I don't know.
In a perfect world, it might last all the way to October, but that seems unlikely these days. You've got one version of the cartoonish slogans. You've got a debate in Parliament right now where the Bloc is saying we demand support for $16 billion over 5 years to a poorly targeted and expensive program. Seems an ineffective way of using a taxpayer dollar we don't have right now.
Poorly targeted seniors. I don't know, man. You're not going to get a lot of seniors on board saying they're poorly targeted.
But articulate, and maybe there are examples you could point to of what we can expect to see in the advice you're giving and the approach that you hope the government takes hold of into the next election.
Yeah. Well, let me, again, these are great questions and there's a lot in them. Let me make a couple of observations. That Bloc proposal and the fact that all the opposition parties supported it.
Yeah, it's wild.
It's wild. So an extra $3 billion of spending each year, and
these guys are so arrogant about the spending. They seem to have all the answers, except these are the guys who are quite literally not handing over the documents. We're talking $400 million was flushed, Canadian tax dollars flushed into their appointed board members' business bank accounts, let alone, pick on these other guys, Guibo, all of them, Balsanout, et cetera. They're so arrogant, yet we see them stealing our money.
And is that really the best use of that money? And what came to my mind instantly, and I think you observed it as well, is that in the simple slogan category, Pierre Poilievre is a simple rule: $1 for $1.
Yeah, spend a dollar,
cut a dollar.
Yeah.
So what are the $3 billion of spending cuts that he's going to make? I mean, if you're going to put up new spending and you have that rule, you've got to show Canadians what's there.
$1.3 billion right from the CBC. Take that away. There's half of it. He's already stated multiple things. There's billions of dollars. $400 million getting flushed into Annette Verschen's, business accounts, plus all the eco-green slush fund stuff. You add in that $400 million plus the 1.3, you're already at 1.7 billion. There's plenty of savings. These liberals waste money and they are flushing in their own bank accounts and they act all high and mighty. They're like arrogant white knights sitting here like no one else can figure out this stuff. Only them. They're the smartest ones out here. The conservatives' brains are too small to figure out these problems. These guys are smug, arrogant, pompous pricks.
Let's talk about the growth issues in Canada. So how do we get growth back up? And if the Canadian economy were as productive as the American economy, so if we we used all our resources so to speak as efficiently as the American economy, if we close that gap, which is about 30% with the US, it's an additional 35,000 Canadian dollars for every Canadian. So it's a huge amount of money. That's money that goes obviously for government, for social programs. We can invest in our health service, not rely on compound increases in foreign students in order to pay for our post-secondary education, all these sorts.
Our GDP has dropped, yes. you used to be on par with America. Now they're 30% higher. Our GDP has been flat over the last 10 years under Trudeau. Why do they just seem to glaze over these facts? They just pretend that the Trudeau era, even though quite literally it's them. Carney was brought on recently here, but Nate has been a part of that for 10 years, and he's just kind of shrugs his shoulders like he's not part of the problem.
Sorts of things. So there's real value in doing this. It also means much higher wages for Canadians by definition. So why are we less productive? Which things can we change in order to close some of that gap? And where can we build on our advantage, our unique advantages? And that's basically what I'm looking at with others through this task force. And so one of the core things in terms of why we're less productive is we actually give our workers less to work with. There's less so-called capital, there's less software, there's less investment, fewer tools, so to speak, for our workers. It's like shoveling your driveway with a shovel.
And it's business investment.
It's business investment. Yeah. And you have to, when you look at outside of the resource sector, we just don't invest in much in our workers.
So they just go on to ramble, but Nate slipped it out there. Spring election, well, unless they can make it to October, but I don't think they're doing that. I don't know if they'll make it to next week at this point. We have a very bizarre video here. We've got MP Jonathan Wilkinson here. This is Justin Trudeau's Minister of Natural Resources, and he is endorsing an independent, see down here, Karen Kirk, whatever her name is, Kirkpatrick or whatever. Why is he endorsing an independent in, I think this is North Vancouver?
Hi, I am Jonathan Wilkinson. I am a resident of this riding, and I am also privileged to serve as the Member of Parliament for North Vancouver. I've known Corinne for a number of years now. She is a very thoughtful person, somebody who weighs evidence and data in the context of making informed decisions. She has been a moderating influence in the provincial legislature, and after this election, I hope that she continues to be a thoughtful, independent, moderating voice going forward. She is somebody who knows that climate change is real. It is a scientific fact. But she also understands we need to build an economy that's going to create jobs and economic opportunity for our kids moving forward.
So she's a nut job just like you.
She believes in the importance of reconciliation with Indigenous peoples, and she knows that we have to have a strong fiscal foundation to ensure that we have sustainable programs moving forward. So as we approach Election Day, folks need to make their own decisions, but I would encourage you to consider voting for Corinne Kirkpatrick.
This is the weirdest thing I've ever seen. How much does your gas cost in BC? Yeah, no kidding. Wow, Wilkinson just ended her campaign. Next up, we've got honking is heard in unison across rush hour traffic as many looking to go home after a hard day's work, while unemployed pro-Hamas loyalists prevent them from doing so in Ottawa. So the cops here are breaking the law too. The cops should be arresting them because terror groups cannot assemble like this. So if somebody is there, remind the police that terror groups are not allowed to have assembly and form groups in Canada. Our country's a joke. Jumping over to my group here, let's check out some memes. Biggest liar in Canadian history has no right to regulate online disinformation. No kidding. Now the boys legislating a ban on regular vehicles that run on gasoline and diesel. It's real, folks. 2035 the date. Trudeau's not going to last that long. He's not even going to get to Christmas at this point. Did you know dinosaur farts were of the largest contributors to climate change 250 million years ago? Atmospheric river. This is hilarious. Yeah, it's called heavy rain. These names they put for this stuff is just ridiculous. What are some of the other ones? Heat dome. These made up words trying to scare people. I'm a military. Doug Ford to replace Toronto's bike lanes with a fancy new spa. So this joke is in relation to, well, there's this waterfront area with a bunch of trees he just allowed to get completely cut down. It's a bonehead thing to do. And then he's also removing bike lanes to put in more roads so the traffic flows better. Stop. Please do not enter our hospital if you're feeling unwell. This is hilarious. Burn our flag, eh? See you soon. Ooh, the Patriots. So there's some copyright music on there, but Patriots coming out. Don't burn Canadian flags. No caption required. I finished 3 books over the weekend. Believe it or not, that's a lot of coloring. I've seen this joke before. It's good every time. You can totally just see the guy. Like, you can actually picture him just sitting there. I got some of it in the lines. Now we'll find out why Canada is so effed up. Oh, come on, man. You really surprised? The main takeaway from this podcast is both these guys are really arrogant. They're just really pompous. They think they're better than everyone. They're sitting there puffing their chests out like they're so much better than everyone. Carbon tax Carney is a smart guy, and he's too smart. He knows how to use the system against us. That's another takeaway. Was this a Freudian slip? Did Nate slip the cat out of the bag there, spring election? I wonder if Trudeau would be keeping this to himself, or would he be sharing this among the greater members of his caucus? Because it seemed like it just kind of rolled off his tongue, like this is something they've been talking about for a while now. One thing's for certain, though, next week in question period, Pierre Poilievre is going to absolutely rip apart Justin Trudeau.